Now that the second tale for the Far Territory expansion has been released, I think it's time to look at the story of the Far Territory and try to fit it into the timeline for the Long Dark. In the last timeline video, I discussed the history of the Far Territory and its regions. In this video, I will be discussing the events of the Rudiger project and the relative order in which they occurred. This is your spoiler warning for the Forsaken Airfield, Signal Void, and Buried Echoes updates. Before I continue, please make sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts as you watch, and watch to the very end to boost the video analytics. First, there are a few things I want to mention ahead of time. I have this timeline I made for the events of the history of the Long Dark, spanning from the earliest lore entry to the start of Wintermute. If you want to learn about this timeline and the lore behind it, check out these videos, which will be in a playlist linked at the top right of the screen, in the description, and at the end of the video. I have also amended it to include the founding of the Spence family homestead, which is something I forgot about in the original history of the Long Dark videos. As the video progresses, you may see this symbol on the bottom left of the screen. This signifies that I am speculating about what I am saying, since not everything is 100% clear. Take those parts with a grain of salt. It all started in 1982. Rudiger was a scientist and engineer that had a goal. He had traveled the world, but was unsatisfied with the direction his life's work had taken him. He wanted something to truly define his moment. His legacy was the reason he did what he did. This led him to create the machine, the generator of nightmares. He then proceeds to hire various groups of people to build this machine. He hires the security chief from some kind of security firm to keep the other workers in check. At this time, I believe the Langston mine is ramping down its operation as it was about to shut down. This explains why the foreman of the mine from when it was still operational was still around. The foreman and the miners would begin to prepare the mine for the project. Based on a few notes at Field 31, I believe that someone had gone to the airfield to scout the location as a possible landing zone for Rudiger and his team. The scout was most likely the security chief. The airfield was unfortunately not busy enough to camouflage their arrival. Instead, the team would arrive on a ferry, which most likely took them to a place called Port Mary. They came with the equipment they needed to begin the project. After traveling along the Trans-Island Railway line, the team would arrive at the Langston mine. This team was most likely filled with other engineers or researchers. After the mine is prepared, the real work would begin. During the construction of the machine, generators would be brought in to power it. A few notes from the airfield suggest that mysterious cargo was cleared to arrive at the airfield. The employees were even told not to bother the handlers of this cargo, which I believe were part of the project. Toasty, who I believe is an off-the-grid hermit that lived next to the airfield, noted helicopter sightings in a note. There were several over a few months, as well as some the previous year. Depending on the length of the project, it is possible it started at the end of 1982 and went into 1983. I suspect these helicopters were bringing in the generators, which were the mysterious cargo at the airfield. At some point in time, Rudiger forces the miners to sign new contracts for the job. I believe it forced them to stay for longer in order to get paid. This is where I suspect that a group of miners would begin to show disapproval of how the project was managed. This is possibly what the mention of Team 3 and Signal Void is referring to. At this point, there are some things I gathered from various notes that I'm confused about. While making this video, I placed all of the security chief logs and foreman site reports in chronological order, but there is a problem with two of these notes. Security Chief's log 14 mentions that the medical officer was performing alignment interviews on the miners after the Team 3 trouble. This happens before the machine is turned on in Security Chief's log 23. In Foreman's site report 64, the foreman mentions that Rudiger wanted a doctor to come talk to the miners, which is a clear reference to the medical officer. This is after the machine is turned on. So if the medical officer was there before the machine was turned on, who was this additional doctor? It's hard to tell if Hinterland messed up the story here a little bit, or if these notes don't necessarily display their events in chronological order. Some of the security chief logs contain events that occurred over weeks, so it's possible that individual notes had events written out of order. After the medical officer conducted alignment interviews, the security chief called in extra security to escort Team 3 out of the mine. This security team most likely came from the same security firm she was hired from. Once the machine was finished, it would be turned on and its effects could be felt immediately. The outbreak that would follow had 3 distinct stages. Stage 1 is the start of the uneasiness. This is also when insomnia would occur, leading to an increase in trouble sleeping. A side effect would be the various dream sequences and recurring dreams that the people in the mine would have. The medical officer would interview everyone about these dreams on a regular basis. Stage 2 is when the dreams of the people in the mine would become scrambled with real-life memories and nightmarish scenes. This is also when memory problems would begin, loss of focus would become more common, and aimless wandering would endanger the people in the mine. The uneasy feeling has evolved into a clear feeling that something is very wrong with the brain. Stage 3 is when irreversible damage to the brain has occurred. This would eventually lead to brain death. By this point, it is only a matter of time that the person dies from lack of sleep or loss of normal brain function. By the time the machine was turned off, the outbreak had reached its critical point for most of the people inside the mine. Rudiger would leave early, abandoning everyone. An extraction would eventually be called to get everyone to the mainland. The medical officer concluded that the interviews provided no useful data. The security chief noted the machine had bizarre benefits, but at a major cost. The extraction would arrive to take some of Rudiger's victims to a friend of the security chief, but it is clear from the helicopter crash that no one made it out alive. We do not know how this helicopter crashed, but part of me thinks that Rudiger had some way or some kind of connection to help him bury the evidence. On this helicopter, the security chief had left a note for their friend and shared their old call sign, Toasty. They had met at a job site in Alaska. It was clear that this friend of hers was a doctor, as Toasty sent the victims of the outbreak to them for help. Another thing that was clear is that some people were left behind. I believe these are the bodies you can find deep in the mine. They were most likely too far gone from the effects of the outbreak, making it pointless to extract them. While Toasty mentions them at the start of Buried Echoes, this wasn't the only thing she came back for. She eventually confronts Rudiger, who had returned after some time. He reveals to Toasty how he evaded the effects of the machine. By using a secure location at a transmission site over the mountains, he ensured his safety while everyone else had their minds destroyed by the machine. At some point in time, Rudiger leaves behind an audio recording of his testament for his life's work. Toasty would then attempt to destroy the machine, but failed. She would only be able to partially damage it. As her mind continued to fall apart, she laid down in the control room to write a final note to her friend and lover. The security chief of the Rudiger project would eventually die in the control room, just beside the machine of nightmares. Rudiger would disappear, taking as much evidence as he could with him. He would travel across Great Bear Island to Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Omega bunkers, which were most likely nuclear bunkers from the Cold War, to bury the various logs and interviews. In the process, there would be some form of signal interference from these bunkers, affecting the SAR transmitters. I do not know why this was needed or when it occurred, but it is clear from the airfield memo that it had to be within a year of the airfield closing and the loss of SAR coverage for the island. No one would notice because no one was using the transmitters. Fast forward to late 2022 or early 2023, depending on when survival mode takes place, the events of the Rudiger project would be unearthed. The SAR transmitters would be repaired, the bunkers were discovered, the interference was cleared, the horrors of the Rudiger project would be revealed, and the security chief would be laid to rest next to the enduring waterfall in the zone of contamination. Unfortunately, this is where the story of the Rudiger project ends for now. The third and final tale will hopefully answer any remaining questions. While I definitely have a ton that I want to discuss, this is actually not the last video for Buried Echoes. The next big video will be the revision of my theory for how the Rudiger project will connect to Wintermute. By the way, I started a Discord community for the channel and would love it if you join so we can discuss the Long Dark, share memes, and you can see exclusive content. The invitation will be in the description of this video. If you want more lore videos for the Long Dark, please make sure to comment, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Also, if you can spare a few bucks, you can become a member to further support the channel. If you can't, I totally understand. Shout out to my current members.